in love with the food, in love with the homies, in love with the church.
I love you guys.
Huh?
I love you guys.
I love you. Cookie Henry loves us. We love Cookie Henry. We love people in the ministry. We love the church. Yeah, so I just want to just do a general, just check up on that. I'll just do a quick, one quick thing. A lot of love responsibility and especially a lot of theology body really picks up from like the last chapter. So if there is one thing from the first chapter, because I think Cookie Henry was here for the first session.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's one thing from that first chapter is basically going between the difference between love and use. And you guys, yes.
Sorry, what was the first session about?
First session, basically the big part of it it was going over was the differentiation between love and use, and also a part of it was going into more into the physical, the importance of us as human beings in bringing about the creation, God's creation. You know, as man and wife, they have such an important part in bringing about new life into the world, new life into the church. A lot of people think, oh yeah, like God breathing life into the world, but like man and wife, as his physical instruments, they are the ones that really bring it about into the world. And then going back to the idea of love versus use, you guys might have heard this quote before, like the opposite of love is not hate, but it is of use. Looking at someone and not loving them the way that God intends for us to love them, but loving them in the way that the devil wants us to use them for our own personal gain, whatever it might be. But basically, we use that person. We don't see them as the creation of God, a beautiful creation of God, as a son or daughter of God, but we see them as a means to an end, which can come about in many different forms. So that sort of wraps up actually session 1. Anything else I should really hit up, Kuyani?
That's
Sort of the main gist.
Yes.
That will really help us guide into the second chapter of this one. We might do chapter 2, part 2, because it is pretty dense. It really picks up. But at the same time, a lot of it is repetitive. So if you hear me repeat a lot of stuff, then that's because it's normal. For anyone who's taught confirmation, Kuya Henry knows, I think, confirmation, or catechism, you actually repeat a lot of stuff throughout the entire year. So let's go into it. So into this first chapter, I'm just gonna go like as it goes through the book. But the first part, it really goes into the metaphysical analysis of love. Metaphysics is things of nature, like natural things that God created out of our human perception. And he really divides love into 3 things. Okay, so the first thing is love as attraction, love as desire, and love as goodwill. Okay? Love as attraction, love as desire, and love as goodwill. So the first one is love as attraction. Who here has ever thought that there was a sister in SFC, maybe in the CLP? I thought they were pretty cute. You thought they were good looking? Raise your hands. Yeah. Damn. Oh yeah. They're like, oh yeah, we're just having fun. They're like, ooh, who's that? But love as attraction, hey, do we know what we're attracted to? Maybe a little bit, but oftentimes these feelings come about spontaneously because it is a natural occurrence of the body. And it's a sort of idea like, oh, like love is blind, right? Maybe we're attracted to someone. Maybe people like will see like, you guys ever see like, I don't know, TikTok videos or YouTube videos where like a girl like does something, or even in movies, like a girl does something amazing, and then there's a guy there who's thinking like, man, I think I'm in love. Yeah, love is blind. It sort of continues on with that love is blindness. We only see what we perceive. And it's like, oh, I'm in love with that person. But really, you sort of only love like 1% of that person. We're missing so much more of who that person is. But hey, of course, it is the first thing that we notice. Like, especially things from outer beauty. What is the first things? We sort of notice 2 things at first. by what we see, okay? And also, I want to say by what we smell. Those are sort of the big things, okay? Okay, say like, hey, like food-wise, okay? You go to like a Korean barbecue place, you smell that meat, and you're like, it's gonna be a good night. It's gonna be a good night. Maybe like you go to like a restaurant, and you know how there's like always the servers passing by with food, and you're like, dang, and you think it's for you, it's for another table, or you look at, you're like, man, I should have ordered that. Two very first perceptions that we have are by visual or smell. So visual, like I said earlier, maybe you saw a girl at COP, maybe you saw a girl at Mass, maybe if you're lucky, she had a veil. She had a veil, and you're like, ooh, man, Holy Spirit. Or maybe, hey, you know, she passes by you and you smell, it smells like roses. And you just follow along. But like I said, those are the first things we really pick up. And just the things that we're attracted to. The physical, the sexual, the emotional, the romantic, the aesthetic. But mostly in this phase, we really learn to like someone for certain qualities or certain things that we're attracted to, that we look into. Okay, that's the first metaphysics, love as attraction. That is just things we like, simple. The next metaphysical aspect of love is love as desire. Okay, so love, the desire belongs to an essence of love, and it just comes from the fact that, especially for us, a big thing we talked about, and actually Pat talked about it in his prayer today, is just to have that humility. Understanding that we are not self-sufficient beings, but that we are reliant. Reliant in God, reliant in Christ, reliant in other people, and especially for us, like I said, reliant in needing other beings. Depending on our vocation, for most of us, for some of us, especially for those discerning vocation of marriage, we become reliant in needing our wife, we're needing our spouse. For those who really are reliant in, or for those discerning vocation of the priesthood, they become reliant on the mother church, you know. And for those who really discern maybe like single blessedness, they become reliant on the community that they're really building for that vocation. Like I said, so the difference between attraction and desire. Attraction is I like this thing, you know, like I just like this, I like that, I like this, I like that. Desire really comes like a call to action for us. Now we make an effort to gain what we desire. We make an effort to go for what we desire. We make an effort to make a move, to slide into DMs, whatever it may be. That is part of that desire, okay? We want for something to happen. It's the difference between like, I like water, okay, cool. You like water, versus I want water, in which it becomes an action. Okay, you want another water, you know?
I'm good.
Sure. Anyone want water?
You don't desire water?
No desire for water. Yeah. So yeah. Remember. So what was the first metaphysical part of love? Love as attraction. Thank you. And then love. The second one is love as desire. Okay. So love as desire. And then the third one is love as goodwill. Okay. So what is love as goodwill? Love is the fullest realization of the possibilities inherent to man, in bringing about like the fullness of love as God intended it to be. Not just a desire of a person as a good for self, but we also desire the good for the other. So it's sort of the difference between, at least from what I remember from like philosophy back in the day, the difference between like eros love and agape love. So eros love is you love someone, but it's more for your personal gain. Oh, I like the way you make me feel. Oh, I like the way like I am around you. You make me feel special, have fun with you, yada, yada, yada. And then when you have this idea of agape love, it's more a sacrificial love. Okay? God didn't send Jesus Christ here just because he wanted to feel good about himself saving us. But he sent his son to die for us because he knew in that salvation, in his death and resurrection, he'd be able for us to have a chance to reach salvation, to reach heaven, open the gates up of heaven once again. So that comes about in the goodwill and when it comes to maybe other people they're interacting with. It's not so much, oh, I like you. You make me feel good. You make me feel happy. You make me feel joy. But more so in the fact that like, oh, like, I like you. I see God in you. And I want to will the goodness of God in your life. I want to help you achieve the goodness of God in your life. Same as an example could be in this ministry. Sometimes for Stan, I know half the time he calls me, he wants me to do something. And I'm like, okay, Eros love, Stan, all right, I'll do it for you. But then half the time...
Did you say Eros love?
It's not like that. It's like, well, I see it differently in like the ancient, super ancient philosophy. But then it's like, oh, like having like the agape love of like, hey, but like, you have those times when we catch up and it's all like, hey, I want to know how you're doing. I want to help keep you accountable. Hey, like in your prayer life, in your Exodus 90, in your Lenten practices, stuff like that. That's what we really focus on. Really bringing about the goodwill to others. So it's not to love like for yourself, but to love the other person for their sake in their own way. Okay? That makes sense? Any questions, comments, concerns? I know it's a lot. Honestly, that was pretty much a summary of the entire chapter. Everything will pretty much relate back to those three things. Okay? Love as attraction, love as desire, and love as goodwill. So before we go into that, you're engaged, you're married, well, you're seeing someone, you're dating someone long term. Single, maybe. Single, maybe. Single, maybe. Single,
Yeah.
maybe. Single. Okay, but when it comes to those things, a little bit we're gonna go into now will be going into love as we interact with other people. Or more specifically, love as we go into discern our vocation and just how we interact with the ladies, sisters of God. Yes.
I have a question about the three that you mentioned: attraction, desire, and what was
Goodwill.
that? Goodwill.
Yes.
Are they three different representations of love, or they make up what love is supposed to be? Like one, if one is not present.
Not completely. They're all different like aspects of love. Yeah. So of course, like the physical will be attraction, what we see. Desire is desire basically becomes our action, what we want, what we actually want, and then goodwill comes about of like sorry, because it's a little tiny in the end, but goodwill pretty much comes from like really loving a person, but loving a person not so much for your own gain, but together, both of you together will bring about the goodness of this love or the completion of love as God intended. And it's more so not love as a feeling, but more love as the virtue of love, and the theological virtue, which is like faith, hope, and love. Love being the greatest of these. So that means it's not necessarily something we practice, but being a theological virtue, love is this thing that is God-given. If we allow ourselves to be open, if we allow ourselves to become vessels of God's love, He'll grant it with us. And especially if we bring it with with fiance, girlfriend, fiance, spouse, it really brings about the idea of like, hey, like, if we just open ourselves to the will of God. And if it is God's will, His love will unfold us. His love will guide us. His love will be with us. And like it's different from say like, oh, I love you because you make me feel good. I love you because hey, I think we look good together. It's overall like it's a subjective thought of love in which how you make me feel. Like, oh yeah, I like subjective, like yeah, I feel like I like you. Versus the objective love, which is what's God really trying to call us, and a virtue of I know I love you wholeheartedly. Hopefully through the will of God and with the blessing of that virtue of love, I know I love you. Because attraction and desire is really that subjective, things that we feel. with other people. But like that good will be that. I'm sorry. Yeah, attraction desire is the subjective. Sorry, and then the good will be the objective, where you wholeheartedly know, I love you.
Bishop Barron also defines real love is willing the good of the other for his other's sake. Just for the sake, not for something you can gain or purely for the other person's benefit, willing the good of the other.
Yeah.
Which is not a feeling, it's a decision.
The whole cohesive. And that's how that's said is like perfectly.
I mean, wouldn't
in
that,
simplest forms.
wouldn't that be kind of the whole thesis of like love and responsibility? Essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That is the whole
it's
thesis of
everything.
it.
Everything pretty much ties back.
Yeah,
into
because it all because if that's the objective, if that is the objective truth, all things will fall from that because
Yeah.
that's non-arguable and all encompassing. Whereas subjective can just be situational or in compartments.
Yeah.
So okay.
Because I mean, especially because like in the sub, like, a lot of this, honestly, especially in like most parts of the book, is really trying to become aware of the subjective.
Yeah.
Trying to become aware of those things where it becomes very easy to fall into that, and being reminded of, hey, the objective purpose of love, and bringing about that goodwill in the other. Yeah. Any question? Sorry, that was a good question. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Stan? Okay. So what are you doing, Stan?
He's charging his
He's charging his
pad.
I'm gonna just talk really long, so then it's gonna die. iPad's gonna die. So one of the things he talks about next is this idea of reciprocity. Okay, reciprocity, this exchange between man and woman, the exchange of that love. Love is not just in the man or the woman, or else there would sort of be two loves that really come about. But it must be like a love that's common to them. Okay, so for us as brothers, what is a love that is common for us? Our love for God, our love for Jesus Christ, our love for community. And maybe another part of love that you guys may know is like, hey, like your love for the Lakers, your love for the Clippers. But it's really, like I said, like, it is this common love, but bringing it back to like in relationships and such. There's love between two persons, not a personal, but an interpersonal exchange. And he just goes over like, hey, we need both people to be able to give that love and return that love, and be open to that love of God's love. But how does all of this start? It starts from the beginning, going back to the idea of attraction. St. John Paul talks about this idea of, sympathy. Sympathy to friendship, that sympathy. And oftentimes we think of sympathy of like funerals, like we feel bad. But it also puts that sympathy in which like we have this, or at least when you think of sympathy is, some people say like, hey, like I know how it feels. Just know that things are going to get better. Things will be better. And how it really ties up is that sympathy is more based on the feeling of like, hey, like I've been through that feeling. I understand the struggle. We can connect in that way. And oftentimes that sort of ties in with how we interact with the sisters. Say like y'all ever met a sister that you're trying to get to know, and then like it wasn't really working out until you hit that one topic, and then it just takes off. Right? Have you guys ever had that?
Goes the opposite direction though.
Opposite direction? Oh, okay. So she said a topic, and then you were all like, "Oh, I know about that stuff," and then boom, it takes off.
Continue.
Okay. Yeah. But it's also a sympathy in which, okay, we find things that we have in common. Going back to that attraction. Things that like, hey, I like, they also like as well. Oh, that's pretty cool that we have similar interests and such. Say like, for what if you met a girl and he was like, oh, she's cool, all right, cool. And then she was all like, oh yeah, I have a, I just fully built my S2K, and then would be like, okay, all right. Like, oh, okay, what happened? What happened? Yeah. Or hey, maybe Jerome is out there sparring, and then he's like, oh yeah, like he's just there sparring, just chilling, training, and then like he sees a girl like take down someone else, and he's all like, wow.
I'm scared of that girl. I don't want to touch that girl.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know, man. But it takes, like I said, it starts from that sympathy. But one of the problems with sympathy is, like I said, it comes from those feelings, and we need to bring about from those. We need to really move away from those feelings of emotion and really bring into the objective. And that idea of this need of benevolentia or benevolence, which ties it back into goodwill. That's all it really is, benevolence. I want what is good for you. And it's different because, especially for us, like a lot of our connections will sort of stay in that sympathy of like sympathy. Example being like work, for example. Are you friends with all the people you work with? I mean, you have that connection, right? But would you like actually hang out with them after work or anything? Or they're more of, well, I'm working with you, you're working with me. Let's just work together and get this done. You guys understand that? Or say for Jerome, like jiu-jitsu, are you friends with every single person that you spar with? Or sometimes there's like strangers where you're like, oh, I just gotta get like an extra round in, just for like a little like soft.
Yeah, I mean, they're all really good friends, but objectively, that's
Sometimes
that is what subjectively brought us together.
So then you move from just that sympathy
to
into
the
friendship.
objectivity,
Yeah.
to the deeper, non-superficial.
Not superficial.
But I think that's kind of like with a lot of us. Like an example would be is with work. You said.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
work.
Like you'll have some friends at work you'll probably be more inclined to talk to.
And then some other people was more
Because-
like,
And not that it's bad. It's just
there's some people that you know is
Yeah.
like, hey, more of that connection, more of that goodwill with one another. So it really brings that about. Okay. So like, where I lost my place. So, but that's a good example. Like really, like, for some people at work, we will be able to build friendships with. Same as for high school. You know, in high school, we got to know a bunch of people, and maybe we did become friends with them. But then, after a while, only a certain amount really stayed friends for, well, I guess for the rest of our lives to this point. Okay. Okay. And like I said, like jiu-jitsu, which is perfect. You guys had a common goal of training.
Yeah.
Training for jiu-jitsu, training for tournaments, competitions, and say, hey, in this, like in our ministry or just in the church, we have that common goal of we're trying to build our relationship with God. We're trying to build our relationship with Christ. We're trying to build our faith. We're trying to build theology. We're trying to build catechesis. So it really ties in with that as well. And then as brothers, which is very interesting because he says this in the chapter, we have this need for comradeship. Okay? Comrade, which I know oftentimes when we hear that, we think of two things: communism and Mother Russia. Mother Russia, comrade. But if you think of it, communism from the Latin communis, which meaning is shared or common, like of or for the community, and that's really like, hey, what, like that's really a big part of the church. If you guys are like, I think Creed, if you guys were there for Creed Jonas's talk in December, maybe Creed Henry is there. Stan knows, but he was talking about how a lot of like a lot of orders in the church are pretty much run like a communist society. They pool everyone's goods and do it for the collective, for everyone, for the good of everyone, because they have like that ideal, like, hey, like we have like this shared ideals, shared goals, shared concerns, and shared like work, like similar work that we have to do. So it is that, like, and then from communism, if you think about it, that's where we sort of come into the word communion. Okay, from communionem, meaning fellowship, mutual participation, sharing between, and just sharing. And if you think of comradeship, I'm not saying go start saying, "Hey, what's up, comrade?" Unless that's going to be our new thing as brother, comrade.
I don't know about that.
But if you think of comradeship when it comes between a man and a woman, I'm not saying don't go up to the sisters and be like, comrade. In between man and woman, we do have that. At least between a man and a woman, there is that objective common interest, which is for the development of love. Okay? Development of love. Pat knows about this. Kuya Henry knows about this. The rest of us are still discerning about it. Ray may know about it a little bit. But really just that development of love. Okay? And then, and I think what Kuya Henry said from Bishop Barron is also sort of echoed from Catechism of the Catholic Church, 1766. It's actually a quote from St. Thomas Aquinas too. To love is to will the good of the other.
Oh, that's where it gets it from.
Yeah, that's where he gets from. I was going to be like, hold on, I remember that. Yeah, so from St. Thomas Aquinas. To love is to will the good of the other. All other affections have their source in this first movement of the human heart toward the good. Only the good can be loved. Passions are evil if love is evil, and good if it is good. Like you said, love is an action, a selfless action that seeks to lead others towards a relationship with God and eventually heaven. So that is our goal, and I think that becomes really apparent when we think of like 3 P's as brothers. You know, protectors, provider, and pastors. Okay, protector, we protect them and want to keep them safe for their goodwill. Provider, for them to be able to provide for them in the life that we hope, like we wish for them to enjoy. And then pastor, helping them be able to reach God in a greater sense, to understand God in a greater sense, to understand their faith more, and really to build in their faith, in their hope, and in their love. Hey, even like I've heard this from other people as well too. They'd be like, especially with from some people like from like some of my friends from the diocese, they'd be like, yeah, you know, honestly, especially one of my good friends from kindergarten, she was saying like, yeah, one of the things that sort of annoyed me back when I first started dating this person was that they loved Jesus more than me. Yeah. But then once they kept building up to him, but they're like, oh, but because they love Jesus more than me, I was able to fully understand my vocation and understand myself as a beautiful creation of God. Because, hey, they did have that love in Jesus, loving God, and really asked for that theological virtue of love to really pour down on them. Sorry, that's a little, wording is a little off now. I'm trying to remember how to word. But yeah, like I said, to understand God's love in their lives. And it's not just in, like, once you find someone like, oh, I really understand God's love. Like, God's love has been working throughout our whole entire lives, because remember that we are made in the image and likeness of God. We are created in the abundance of God's love, okay? Not just leftovers, in the full abundance of God's love we are created. So that's what we look to, that's what we look for. And then last one. Well, not last one. I forgot, what time did I start, Sam? You're recording, so I know.
You have 28 minutes, so you're 15.
What time did I start?
Oh, that was
Oh, was it? It's been 8 minutes already?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, there's time.
It's like 15.
There's time. Okay. I only have 3 pages left. But I think that really brings us to this sense of betrothed love. Love is not just an aspiration, but a coming together of 2 people, a unification of persons. And it's just this, it's really this active decision within ourselves to give ourselves to another person. Like, it's not just me, it's not just I, but now it's us. And you surrender that I for the us. And in giving ourselves, but one of the things when it comes to really giving ourselves is we have to understand, what are we giving? Okay, who are we giving? Who am I? If we're not fully sure of our lives or what we're doing, or understanding the love that we hold in our hearts, then how can we truly offer that up to this person that we're trying to love? And that sometimes can be the most difficult thing, just because like really taking the time to know yourself, and really tying it back into the idea of like, hey, we're made in the image and likeness of God. Do we see ourselves as God intended us to be? Do we see ourselves in God's beauty? And it's this quote that you see online, like, oh, like when you look in the mirror, are you able to see Jesus Christ within you? And then in that sense, are you able to, fully knowing yourself, be able to offer yourself fully, mind, body, and soul to, well, not soul, so, but physically, emotionally, and in a sense spiritually, in building your faith with someone, are you able to offer that to, hopefully, who will be your girlfriend, your fiance, and then they will become your wife. Yeah, mind, body, and soul. You get what I'm saying by soul. But yeah, but as a betrothed love, and really, yeah, unification of persons. Sam, where am I at? 30 minutes?
C.
Okay, cool. Okay, we're just gonna start doing speeding through. Okay, so that was the metaphysics of love, love and understanding love in its attraction, desire, and goodwill. Now we're just gonna run through the psychological analysis of love, or just how we know love as. First one, sensuality. Okay, our senses. Okay. And that really goes into like the way that we feel, the way that we think, and especially like I said, one of the first things we sense when it comes to maybe someone we like is usually our ability to see, smell, even hear them. Okay, but in a sense we're able to see. Usually our first sense is being able to see. Okay, speed of sound is like what, 600 miles per hour or so. Speed of light is like
180,000 miles per second.
what could Henry said? A lot. 182,000 miles per second?
More or less.
Oh, okay. I forgot. Trying to remember in like miles per hour, but that's too hard. And then okay. But yeah, like I said, like light travels fast, so our senses are usually the first thing that we see. But St. John Paul says that it is normal for us to really find ourselves like, hey, like to be physically attracted to someone, because it is a normal response of our bodies. When you think of Adam and Eve, when Eve made Adam eat the apple, they both ate the apple, they fell into original sin. They noticed that they were naked and such. Of course, like that original sin really tainted our view of the human body. But then even then, like God really intended for us to be like, hey, like you will still have that attraction. It just depends on how you use that attraction. Is it attraction just to a certain aspect of their body? Is it a certain attraction to a certain thing, to a certain physical aspect? And that is normal in the beginning, but if we leave it there, then that's when our love becomes lust. Because then we sort of lust, and the devil really will tempt us to lust over certain things. That's why you have like, especially like, you'll see today, like I was watching New Girl, and you guys know like Winston, that thing he always says when he sees a girl, he'll see a girl like, hey, Winston, talk to her. Like, shorty, what that thing do? You know, rather than actually going up and talking to them. Hey, it is normal for the body, especially for us as brothers, like to feel that physical attraction. But how do we build up from that? So then we move past that sensuality and really move into sentiment, looking away from the physical, but really looking inwards, looking to their values, their feelings, who they are as a person, what they do with their lives, what are the characters and values that they display through their life that, hey, we find an attraction to. It really seeks proximity, really seeks to look towards their character and who they are as a person. Because let's be real, and I think sometimes you'll see this in TV shows and movies. There'll be a girl who's like, oh, yeah, she looks like pretty cute and such too, right? And then next thing you know, she's mean. Maybe she has like a really like whiny voice that you're like, oh, I don't know about that. Disrespectful. Maybe she's a drama queen. all these different things. So then sometimes what we were attracted at first physically, now we realize like, oh, that character's not for me. That's not what I want. But in getting to know the person in their true values, that's when we're able to really get to understand and maybe take that first step into taking the first step into knowing this person in love as a whole. The only problem with problem of integrating in that love is that for us it gets very easy to fall into the things that we desire, okay, things that we want. So oftentimes, and I fall into this too, you know, you find someone, they're great in everything, you know, and you're like, there's many of these things that you like about them and such too, but there's also a few things that you actually don't like. And maybe some of the things might actually be red flags. But there's a lot of things that you like about that person. So you're willing to disregard some of those red flags and disregard some of those things. St. John Paul says that that's when it becomes the problem of integrating love, because now we're starting to love this person simply based on what we desire or what we want to look at. We're loving this person based on our own view of them, on our own perception of them, rather than loving the person as they are, through their flaws, through their difficulties, not just our own perception. And it's, we're really deciding for their own, sorry, where am I at? Okay, there it is. Okay, sorry. We're really deciding on our own whether we like them for their true nature, for as themselves, wholly, like as a daughter of God, or if we just like them just because we sort of are trying to mold them into our lives, mold them into the things that we want, and completely disregarding like what we don't want. I think it's easy to be like smitten by love. How you guys ever like, hey, like you like this girl, and then you're like, okay, cool, everything was going great. And have you guys ever had like a brother come to you and be like, hey bro, we gotta talk, man. Yeah, you know that girl, I don't know how she feels. Stan knows. Stan has had to give that talk. But just be like, yo, I don't know how like she is, man. I hope you understand. And that person,
Oh, no, I got the talk given to me
oh yeah, okay, you had that talk given
multiple
to you.
times.
Multiple times. Yeah. But then that person, like they're just there, and they're just like, or like, say like for you have to talk to someone because you're like, hey bro, that girl, I don't know how she is, man. Like I know you like her and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes there's either two ways. That person will be like, oh, I understand, man. I didn't know about that. Like, I didn't know she was making me act this way. I didn't know she was like that. Like this changes things. Or the other type, which will be, the guy will be like, I don't know what you're saying, man. You don't know her like I do. I love her. And then you're just like, freaking dang. And then they just fall into that sense of just, okay, like, fine, you're gonna love them just the way that you know them, but you really have to understand their flaws. Their flaws, their shortcomings. Because hey, that is a part of who they are. That is not something that we can like completely like erase and such. You know, that is something that we have to accept. Especially as being like men, as being like, well, not being brothers, but also as being men in pursuit of the sister. We have to be able to, hey, like embrace those things and really help guide them in really building up in their faith, building up in I guess in cardinal virtues, building up in their morality to be able to overcome those shortcomings, to be able to overcome those faults. Cool. Okay, part 2. That's done. Psychological analysis of love. Okay. Next, we come to the ethical analysis of love, which is the last part, but it is a long part. I still have like about a page, give or take. Okay. So ethical analysis of love, we come down to experience and virtue. And experience or virtue really comes to this concept of duty as brothers. Write it down. Man's duty to choose the true good, the duty that fully displays the freedom of the human will. The will ought to follow the true good. The will ought to follow the true good of God. And that really calls us to really go away from love as an experience and to really understand love as a virtue, to move away from the subjective and really move into the objective. Okay, and understanding that virtue and you guys know like the cardinal virtues and theological virtues, right? Cardinal virtues are virtues in which we as human beings are able to practice and really help practice to help build our moral understanding, our moral compass. Theological virtues are virtues which, how do I put it in a sense, we learn to try to they're God given. So cardinal virtues are virtues that we are able to practice and really able to like build up in. Theological virtues are virtues where we have to rely on God. We have to rely on Him to really to grant us those virtues, such as is the virtue of love. And that's why you always hear it's like, oh, like of course love is like a triangle, not a love triangle like we see it here on this world, but a triangle in which you have man and woman, and then at the top you have God, helping to guide them and helping to grant them that virtue of love. So in really building towards that love as a virtue, you also have to understand the sense of affirmation. Okay, we all love being affirmed. It feels good. Let's be real. When someone's like, "Hey, great, proud, bro," we're like, "Oh yeah, you did great." "Oh man, that was awesome." Yada yada yada. We like being affirmed, but especially when it comes to this relationship, we really look to affirm the person, and not like affirming, as in like sometimes we'll hear people we'll hear like other guys, especially at the bars, like they catcall other girls and be like, "Yo, girl, you looking good," or like, "Yo, this or that," like more physical aspect and such too. But affirming, such as in the fact of like, hey, like as a person, like, hey, like, an example would be like, oh, like, hey, I truly felt it has been a blessing to be able to encounter you this weekend because I've been able to encounter Christ through you. Okay, like, oh, hey, like, it has been a blessing to know you. Like, thank you for praying over me because really that's something that I needed, and truly it was just a real blessing for that. Or say like another like affirmation would be like, hey, you did great in like that interview. You did great. You did great in maybe like we're doing sports. You did a great job in sports. You did a great job in work. Anything with family, anything that really affirms the person in their actions and in their will. We really look to affirm that. Oh yeah, and then affirmation of the person, like I said, it really brings back to understanding like, hey, as it is not just saying like, oh, we like one thing about you or the other thing about you, but it's more understanding like, hey, you as a whole, you as a person, you as a creation, one of God's beautiful creations, I fully affirm you in who you are, in the vessel of love that you are, and in all that you do. Because the love is not just directed towards the body, but love is directed towards the soul. And affirmation is also another way that we're able to share that love. Let's go back. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Stan has me at 8-minute clock. It's gonna be an hour, huh? Okay, I'm gonna time it up. So I'm just gonna start cutting through. Okay, so we have this thought of choice and responsibility. Choice and responsibility, which St. John Paul says is basically us having a responsibility for one's own love. And that really brings back to what I said earlier about us understanding what are we offering. Like to the person that we're trying to encounter, the person we're trying to love, what are we offering them? Are we fully aware of our own life? Are we fully aware of our own actions? Are we fully aware of the love that we hold inside of us, that we are able to freely give it to someone? And it's the same as like, hey, if you're like a salesman, if you're in sales or you're in marketing, do you know what you're selling? Do you know what you're offering? Sometimes you'll have someone they won't fully understand. Like if you try to like ask someone like in like someone new, say like you're buying a car, and you're like, oh yeah, well, tell me about this car, and they're like, oh this car, I don't know, yeah. You can tell they don't really know. They not really qualified to really sell. As compared to someone who's maybe a veteran or someone who really knows the car, is like, oh yeah, this car does this, and like this amount of time, suspension's great, has a turbo, yada yada yada, all these different things. They know what they're selling. They know what they have to offer. So it makes them more confident and makes them more understanding of what is being given. So, and that's what really calls us for us to really become responsible for our own love. Are we mature and complete enough to justify the enormous trust of ourselves to another person? And I think that's big. Are we mature and complete enough to justify the enormous trust of ourselves to another person? And I think for like us really like looking to get into relationships, looking to get into dating, and maybe that might not be the question that we think of initially, but that becomes a question that we think of as we go further down the line into the thought of engagement, the thought of marriage. And the greater the feeling of responsibility there is for the person, the more true love there is. If it is objectively good for two persons to be together, then they can belong to each other. It's also just that sense of being responsible and knowing like, hey, like, can we actually work? Sometimes you have those people who are like, let's run away and get married. Let's do it, yeah, let's go. And then they run off, and it's all like, oh, okay, well, like, what are you guys gonna do? Like, do you guys have set jobs? Do you guys have set in like your home, in your household? Are you guys like responsible in that sense? And sometimes there's so many like uncertainties in your life. It's like, oh, well, you know that when you are trying to get in a relationship with someone, you're also bringing those uncertainties with you. And now they have to deal with those same uncertainties. And sometimes, hey, it's not like we can be completely certain about everything in our life, but St. John Paul says that we have to like discern, like, is this something, we have to continuously discern about the responsibility for our own life, responsibility for our own values, the responsibility of what we're given, our sensual values, our emotional values, and our spiritual values. And not just look about like, oh, like how we can be in the future. Yes, it's good to have that hope, but really understand like, hey, right here, right now, may not be the best time, but can we work on it? Can we really build something? Is God really calling us to this vocation? Is God really calling you and I to become us? 4 minutes, perfect stand. It's perfect. Got two last things, guys. Two last things. Next line, write it down. The commitment of freedom. And as you can tell, when it comes to love, and what we often see in like TV shows is like, oh, like yeah, it's getting married, getting tied down. Then there's people like, oh yeah, you know, getting tied down. Or maybe you have friends like, I know I have some like a group of like friends, and it's all like, oh, we hang out and such too. But it would be like, oh yeah, how about like Luis? We haven't seen him in a while. I was like, oh, well, he got married, you know, his wife, his kids. Dang, maybe next time. But every time it's like, oh, maybe next time. So sometimes you think of like love or marriage like as something that really ties us down. But when we really think about it, when we're able to discover love as God intends it to be, that's when we're able to find. Well, that's where it becomes really positive. It becomes really joyful. We're able to see love in all its different forms really come to fruition. And I think, as Higgins said about it, like, oh, like we see love makes it creative, in which we're able to see the many different ways that God shows His love to us. Freedom exists for the sake of love and not for love. Freedom brings about emptiness and unfulfillment. Freedom with love brings about what it is naturally attracted to, which is goodness. Okay, we seek love more than we seek freedom. Okay? And sometimes we see that with people. Like sometimes we just be like, yeah, I'm gonna be a bachelor for life, but then later on in life they're like, I'm all alone. And that brings us like, you remember back to how God made us as human beings, not to be self-sufficient, but always reliant. Reliant in God, reliant in other people. In this sense, reliant of the person we hope to really build our life with. Okay, and then the last one, which is education of love. Education of love. Love isn't just ready-made. Yes, we may be made out of the abundance of God's love, but it is not something that we are, but it is more of a task. It is something that we are becoming. Really building into that love, really building into these vessels for God to really grant us that virtue of love. And it comes in, it really depends on the contribution of both persons and the depth of that commitment. Not just from emotions and desire, but mostly importantly how the work from each person. Okay? The work of each person, and also most importantly, which is actually great, how we pray divine mercy. When you're talking about humility, we look. One of the big things that will come about for love is the work of divine grace. The work of divine grace. And as we finish up, we will finish up like at 55 seconds. Because sometimes it gets very easy for us to maybe fall into the temptation of sin, fall into the temptations of the flesh, fall into the temptations of lust. But as St. John Paul says, do not fear or become discontent if love falls into tortuous ways. We always need to remember that grace has the power to make straight the paths of human love. So as you finish off with this talk in this household, and just from the bunch of information that St. John Paul has shared with us, because there's a lot of information, may we be able, through his guidance, to be able to build in that virtue of love and really become vessels, not just for love and how we feel or how we perceive it, but love as the way that God truly intended for it to be. And that is it. Any questions or comments or concerns? Just sort of open floor right now. Yes, Pat.
2 questions.
Yes.
What if, so you were mentioning like to love someone is to will the good of, for their sake, right?
Yeah.
They're good for their sake. What if that's not reciprocated? Receive the same, because I've known people who have given everything, right, to that person, but that person doesn't give it back, and they're stuck in that relationship. They're struggling. They're suffering. Yeah. What happens then? I don't know the question actually. I was just like,
No, that's
Just wanted to
because
open
that
it.
happens quite often.
yeah.
Well, I guess in the sense like you really have to discern like, okay, in this case I am giving so much of myself to this person, but they have to discern like, is this the person that God really wants me to be with? Yes, hey, as like brothers, hey, we are called to, what's it called? To honor and serve, and really try to give ourselves completely. But if we don't have like that reciprocity, if we don't have that exchange, in that case, we have to. That becomes the question of: is this who God is really calling us to be with? Because we don't have that connection.
Yeah.
As much as we try to do everything, that it just becomes lacking, because like I said, if she doesn't give that love back, then pretty much it's not. It may feel like love, but it's more of just a service to the other person, and that virtue of love can't really be there. It's only one-sided, so no relationship can really come about from that, at least from what I can tell.
Yeah.
Because I know sometimes there are people who really give everything, and then they're like, "Hey, you're a great friend," and they get crushed, friend zone. Then it's all like, "Oh, like I gave everything." It's all like, "Well, did you take the time to discern and really have like that back and forth of like, hey, like, not just you and me, but us." Because so far, at least in that situation, it's more me loving you, or I guess me serving you, but not so much a love between us. Anyone like to comment on that?
And that's why discerning the vocation of marriage is so important, because to be married and to have that permanent bond with someone, and to be in that kind of situation where we're willing the good of the other, and it isn't reciprocated, that is a trial for that couple, especially for someone who's in it for that person. But marriage is a permanent state, and not. And if it's a valid marriage, recognizing the eyes of God that you're valid to marry, as Catholics, there's no divorce. That's why marriage is not something you step into lightly. It's a serious consideration between both parties.
Both parties.
Divorce. Yeah.